Oh, hi there.
Guess we're live. Hey everybody, welcome to Adobe Live today. We are Sandy and Steve, and we are here to teach you a little bit more about the process that happens behind painting a large-scale commercial mural. So we're going to be looking at all of your chat window. I've got it right in front of me, so please definitely engage throughout that chat during the entire duration of the next 2 hours. You guys hopefully had an awesome last half hour with Voodoo Val. It sounds like you are creating a new challenge to come up with some tools for your characters that you created yesterday. So we're really looking forward to taking a look at what you guys have come up with later in the segment. But for now, we're going to get started by looking at the schedule. We've got a pretty full schedule today. Like I mentioned, we're going to be on the next 2 hours, but we've got some awesome stuff coming up as well. So we started this morning with the daily creative challenge with Voodoo Val. 9:30, we're going to be coming on right now. 11:30, we've got an Adobe XD creative challenge with Peter Del Tonto, followed by an Adobe Live XD case study with Josh Iwata happening at 12 o'clock. So stay tuned. We've got a full schedule, and we'll get started now. So, who are we? It's a big question.
It is a big question.
It's a big question. So, like I mentioned, we are Sandy and Steve Pell. We work under the name Pellvetica. You can see it right on the monitor here if you are looking for it at any time during the show. We have been working on murals together for officially 5 years. Unofficially, probably closer to 10. Yeah. We are business partners as well as married, and ironically, it's our wedding anniversary today. So we're at 8 years today. Very excited to be spending that time, and honored to be here in the Adobe Studios today with all of you. So, who we are, where we're from. We're actually Canadian. We're here from an area called Kitchener-Waterloo. It's about 60 miles outside of Toronto. We've been living there for the last year, and prior to that, we spent the last 8 years living in Vancouver on West Coast Canada, as well as a couple years in Toronto prior to that. So we've got lots of spread across the Canadian borders now, and looking forward to showing a lot of that artwork that we've completed to everybody here. When did we get started using Creative Cloud?
Well,
Steve?
I got started using Creative Cloud as soon as it came out. Before then, I started with Photoshop version 5.5. So if you know when that came out, it gives you a basic idea on my age. But I absolutely love Photoshop. I've been using Photoshop since about 1998. And then once Creative Cloud came out, which I really like, gave us the ability to have access to all of the software for a monthly fee, which I personally really like. And so there's a lot of experience with the Creative Cloud for us now. Sandy has been using it heavily now since about 2013, and she's really becoming very strong with the software, and absolutely love it. I mean, we couldn't do what we do without it, so that's why we're here today, to try to show you how we use Creative Cloud to create a mural. So a mural, painting the mural, the actual end of the process itself is the painting part. 90% of the process is done digitally, and there's a lot of work involved in deciding what you want to do, which theme you want to create, the story narrative behind it, all the material expenses. Just there's a lot involved, and we want to walk you through some of the digital aspects of that process today and tomorrow.
Awesome. So we have people joining us from all over the world today. If some of you could maybe type into the chat window, where are you joining us from? I see Tim and Noor and Saber, Gal, Tim again. Thank you, all of you, for leaving your comments here. We've got a lot of happy anniversary wishes in our chat today.
Thank you very much.
We've got a couple people who started on 7, CS4, Michigan, Israel, Arizona. Awesome. So we've got
so
people.
Amazing.
Yeah, we've got.
That's
people.
what I love about Adobe, is it's so global, and it's just incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining us. We love to see you.
Yeah, and the fact that we've got someone from London, Montreal, fellow
Montreal.
Canadian. Yeah,
Bonjour.
It's nice to see that Adobe software is helping creatives like all of you deliver such amazing products and practice. And like Steve mentioned, we are going to talk to you about how we're using the Creative Cloud throughout the entire mural making process. So obviously murals have a ton of planning that goes into them prior to the fact that they eventually get painted on the wall, but ultimately the amount of steps that happen in advance are very tight and very dependent on the Adobe Creative Suite. So let's talk a little bit about our artistic backgrounds in general. So when did you first start creating? I've heard stories of when you were back 5 years old.
I started creating in 1985, so I was 5 years old in 1985, and just been kind of doing it ever since. And I'm going to continue doing it until I'm no longer here. So
Nice.
that's what I love about it. It's I get to do what I love and meet a lot of really cool people like you while doing it. And my biggest goal here is I want to inspire people to paint murals and to approach people to try to paint murals and to make street art more prevalent in all of our cities, because it is such an amazing thing to walk around a city and just see all this incredible artwork. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they have the capability of doing that. And a tool like the Creative Cloud, it just makes it easy. Well, not easy, but easier to do. And we hope you like what we do today.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a question here. What is Pellvetica?
Pellvetica is the name of our collaboration. So both of our last name is Pell. And we are design geeks, and we love the font Helvetica because of its sort of neutral geometry. So both Sandy and I have very different skill sets and very different interests. And what Pellvetica is it's us coming together and filling each other's weaknesses. So this is what I like about the font Helvetica. It's a very neutral font. It's just sort of in the middle of geometry, if that makes sense to you. And that's why we selected the name Pellvetica. Partially because we're pretty big geeks, so we just like the way it sounded too.
We've got some love for our name in the feed, as well as some support for our artwork. Thank you, Tim, for posting our Behance and our website there as well. So just following up on your background with the creative and arts industry, I got started in the creative and arts industry unofficially hobby style back pretty much at 4 or 5 years old as well. My mom and dad got me into tons of pottery classes and printmaking, and just lots of, we had this art center close to our house, and I did a lot of summer camps with them, and did a little bit of time at Dundas Valley School of Art, which is an art school in Ontario. The first time I remember having a breakthrough in the arts side, specific especially to this style that you're seeing in our work today, there was a workshop at the local library, and the workshop was teaching my best friend Dana and I how to use hot wax and to draw all over Easter eggs in beautiful patterns. And then each time we would draw with the wax on the egg, we would dip the egg in a new color of dye, so that at the end we would remove all of the
Hey guys,
the wax.
Thanks for joining.
And we would have a beautiful piece of art at the end. And ultimately that evolved into moving on to notebooks and then fine art, and eventually, like you'll see today, into the mural space.
And when she says notebooks, she means in school when you're supposed to be doing math equations.
Yeah.
Hers was just loaded with doodles.
Yeah.
Quite comical to see, actually.
There are some recent, I was at my mom's 2 weeks ago, and I went through some old grade 6 notebooks, and I put them in my Instagram story. If you're interested in seeing them, it's just at Pellvetica. They're pretty overwhelming. I look like a very distracted child, but clearly I did retain some information from school, so that's okay. It's always fun. Okay, so let's move on to when we actually got started painting our very first mural. We were living in an area called Kitchener, Ontario. It's ironically where we have just moved back to, but we were living in this this loft space.
I could pull that up, actually.
Yeah, let's pull that one up. We were living in this loft space, which it had completely white walls, and we thought it would be exciting to actually, where did we put it? There it is, go right over there.
Oh,
Yep.
Here it is.
So we were living in this loft space, and it had completely white walls, and Steve and I had just moved in, and we were, what are we, in our early 20s?
Yeah.
At this point, and we wanted to get some fun and funky wallpaper to cover this wall near our kitchen. But when we went and got the wallpaper estimate, it was $450, which for two early 20-year-olds moving through school was not really a smart investment on cost. So we ended up using a coupon that I had for a local art store called Michael's, and we ended up buying a tube of paint for 50% off. It was a $7.50 tube of paint. We got it for $4, and I used a paintbrush that I had at home. And so the entire mural here that you see in our loft ended up total costing $4.50 when the original estimate was $400 and $450. So after doing that, it was something that I connected with the local newspaper there and said, hey, I just want to help inspire other people to take what they have in life, not necessarily worry about the money involved in art making, and use what you have to do what you've got to do. So they sent a reporter over to our loft, and they sent a photographer over, and they did this beautiful feature on us, and it was completely unexpected, and I guess kind of kicked things off.
That's what inspired us to say, hey, this is a lot of fun, and people seem to like it. Let's try again.
Yeah, so that was the first mural we ever did. From that point, we started working with the company Hootsuite. Maybe you can pull that one up.
Absolutely.
So Hootsuite is a social media management company based in Vancouver, BC.
Here's a good question here we should answer. How long does a mural take on average? Around 200 hours from conceptualization to completion.
Thank you for asking that, Noah.
Excellent question. It's a question we do get a lot, and that I'd say is our average time. It depends on complexity and the size of the wall, of course.
Yes.
But around 200 hours total.
We've got Ariana. You did that with just one tube? Yes, we did.
Yep.
We really did. Frugal to the max, love it. That's amazing. Dang. I would love to do that to my house. We got someone from Puerto Rico as well. That's awesome.
Welcome, everybody.
Good. So Hootsuite was a little startup when they had grown like a rapid weed, and they had moved into this brand new office and were looking for mural artists to help decorate the walls in the office. So we hadn't painted a mural for, I think it was a good 4 or 5 years since we did that one that we just showed you in our home. How many years? Probably about that time.
Yeah, about 5 years.
A bunch of years had gone by. We had not painted a mural, and decided to throw our names into the pitch to paint a mural at Hootsuite's new headquarters. So we came up with a ton of different concepts. Maybe just scroll down there. I think there's some.
Sure. Actually, it shows the process of how we painted this mural. So you can somewhat see. It's hard to see in here, but the empty wall, the little boardroom table here.
Yeah.
Here it is
wall.
here.
Does this look like other walls in offices that you guys work in? Do you have a lot of white walls in your offices?
Here was our original pitch. So you can see we saw some influence like this piece here. And we thought, hey, that looks pretty cool. Maybe we should do something similar, but in our style and give it a unique flavor. And so here we are. Well, here's Sandy beginning to practice some of the illustration works, practice some pattern work, say in here and here, some pattern work in here, just to kind of get used to just the rhythm of creating pattern work. And this was our first mural in a long time, so we really didn't know what we were doing.
Yep.
So we just found a really cool picture of an owl. You can kind of see here. And here's a bigger one here, blew it up. Used half of the face and just literally traced over top of it. And then Sandy's very good illustration work, she's able to interpret it in her own way, which in the end, this is what the illustration turned out to look like. And the reason why we only painted half is because we're able to flip it. And so we only have to do half the labor as far as illustrating the artwork itself. And then you can see, we then project that image onto the wall. And a lot of people ask, well, why project it? Why not draw it by hand? The answer is simple, is it just allows you to do it a lot faster. So this piece in particular, we were able to complete on a Saturday and a Sunday. If we were to transpose it in a way where you use grid systems, it would have just taken a lot longer due to the complexity of the artwork. So transposing using a projector just seems like the logical thing to do in this case. And so you can kind of see the process. We use acrylic paint markers by a brand called Montana. And they again allow for very fast installation time. So in this case, we just projected it on, did a very quick sketch of how the image should look. Flip it, do the same thing, and then that's where the fun really begins. You get to go in and put all your fun little details in, and then that's what we end up with.
That's what we ended
200 hours later, and we are done.
And what was fun about this one in particular is that we started that weekend, and the company didn't tell any of the employees that it was happening. So they just walked in on Monday, and we're just like,
What?
whoa.
What happened here? What a great reaction.
So we do have a couple questions coming on the feed. One is your work based in raster or vector?
That's an excellent question. It's actually both. So we do use Photoshop to create absolutely everything to begin with. And then at the very end, for example, this image here, I will vectorize in Illustrator. That way I can provide it to the client and then they can use it however they'd like. So for example, they use it in trade show booths. I can show you a quick example of that now.
While you're pulling that up, have you thought of producing in Illustrator and then print to vinyl? Love the hand finish too. So you guys are pre-reading our schedule, so that means that you should definitely stick around because we cover all of these questions today and tomorrow in both of our segments. So that's great.
Let's see, which one am I looking for?
Tim says, so does that mean everything happened in that room? Because he saw us drawing there. You know what, Tim? A lot of that mural in particular did happen in that room. It was Friday night and Saturday morning. A lot of the actual final art did happen in that particular room. We did a lot of concept art and a lot of winning and failing in our home studio before we got to that place, but final artwork was produced in that room. So that's kind of a fun little tip too.
I'm just looking for the Hootsuite. There we go. Sorry for the delay. So for example, Hootsuite now uses the vector artwork in their trade show booths. And designing it using Illustrator and Vector allows them to print it at such large scales without any loss of quality.
So Marisa says, yes, your murals become a working asset for the company. That's right. So
absolutely. The coolest thing we saw when you paint murals, especially for corporations like Hootsuite, is people start to argue over who gets to use that boardroom. So eventually Hootsuite stopped allowing people to book the boardroom because of people fighting over it. And what great feedback. I absolutely loved that.
Yeah, so just to finish that conversation actually, so you can see Hootsuite, maybe zoom in on that little notebook there, but Hootsuite actually they make notebooks with this. You can see actually it's our background too. Look at that, look how funny this looks.
Yeah, that looks great.
It looks great. It's a little paper notebook. We then ended up doing 3 other murals at Hootsuite because of this one. So here's another one that we did here.
Here, I can quickly roll through those.
Yeah, they're
and
fun.
Then we can jump into Photoshop and
show you how it's done.
Yep.
And most importantly, show you guys how you can also make murals with Photoshop. That's the goal here.
So this was another boardroom. So this one was interesting. So after we did that other boardroom, we pitched for a couple more. But what you don't notice about this one, so a little bit of background. Hootsuite, its headquarters is based in an old CSIS building. And what CSIS is it's like the CIA, but in Canada, essentially. Anyhow, they weren't in that building anymore, but they still had these old interrogation rooms. So you have this old, stuffy interrogation room, and well, what should you do? And so they had 2 of these rooms beside each other. So here's a quick sketch on what I thought we could do. So it's looking into the rooms, there would be 2 different owls, creating a whole owl when you're kind of standing outside of both of those rooms. But then I thought, well, what could you do when you're inside that room? And so I came up with this little model to try to conceptualize how it could look and to also be able to pitch that mural to the CEO. The CEO is very busy and he doesn't have a lot of time to review these things. So I figured if I could get a model in front of him, he could see my idea in person and actually play with it tangibly, it might allow him to understand what I'm trying to communicate as quickly as possible. So my solution to this small interrogation room was, hey, why not put mirrors in there? And then each room looks twice as big as it did, and then each room kind of mirrors each other. So that's precisely what we did.
The comments are awesome, guys. You can see the tiny carpet was also purchased for the tiny model. That tiny model was all, I believe, built in Photoshop as well. All of the little model wall assets.
So you can see us working here in time lapse. This is over about 2.5 days. But yep, just paint half of it and the other half reflects in the mirror, creating the full experience, and it worked out really well. It was a lot of fun to do.
They were so fun, and again, they became very heavily booked. And considering how little they were, it was a great project, really fun one.
So you can see the other side here real quick. So this one's a barn owl. The other one is an elf owl. So each of these boardrooms were called barn room and elf room. One of the questions that we saw was, how do you come up with your ideas? Well, the way we come up with our ideas is, honestly, it depends on what the client wants. The client usually has a pretty good idea in mind on what they're looking for. So in this case, Hootsuite's mascot is an owl. So a lot of owl themed this, a lot of owl themed that. So we kind of stuck within the general theme of owls and birds and that sort of thing. So we did do another one at Hootsuite that did keep within the theme of owls and birds, but also kind of Pacific Northwest because the company is in Vancouver. And so we came up with one for another boardroom of theirs that we called surfboard feathers. And so they kind of look like surfboards, but they also look like feathers. But the other main thing, this was in their HR department. And this is where they would interview people to actually get jobs at Hootsuite. But we wanted this piece to kind of feel like diverse and inclusive and just full of different random patterns, but an overall underlying rhythm and structure to it to kind of keep the complexity down, to not overwhelm you too much. Because when you're in an interview, if you're looking at that wall, it might intimidate you a little bit. So how can we keep that intimidation level down a little bit? So that's where rhythm and structure really comes in. And you can kind of see the process a little bit here.
Mm-hmm. It's fun to see the tiny plug, if you look really closely, to give you a bit of scale on that piece.
Not right down here.
Tiny little wall plug down there. And that paint also is, it's all done in a very high reflectant copper metallic. So when you're moving around the room, it has a lot of principles, reflectant light, and it photographs differently from every single angle. Thank you, Stephanie. It's the first time I'm actually watching these live videos. Austin, glad I joined today. This is amazing. Glenn Hughes.
Yes, you will get to see.
Yes, you will. He's here visiting me next week in Kitchener. So nice to see you there, Glenn. Thank you for joining. This is great. So we have a chat and win happening in 6 minutes and 25 seconds. So that's going to be exciting. Every time we watch chat and win, when other people give away the sticker Mural prize, the chat window goes crazy. So that's awesome.
There's some
great questions coming in. Yep. After you paint the mural, do you seal it with anything? Yep. You know what, Samuel? I would encourage you to stick around. We also are going to go through that question as well. Yes, so many great questions. Thank you, everyone. This is awesome. So far, every question that's come in is going to be covered over the next 2 hours.
All right. So why we're here is we want to actually walk you through a project we are currently working on. And we wanted to kind of show you the process from responding to the pitch to, well, not a pitch, sorry, the request for proposal from the client, to the process of pitching them, to the process of winning the pitch, to the process of actually creating the artwork, and then to the process of painting it. We're not going to be able to show you painting it, obviously, because we'll paint it in our studio back in Kitchener, but we can show you everything leading up to that point to try to help maximize the ability for you to win your pitch. So that's one question we get a lot is, how do you land your work? Do you advertise? Honestly, no. It's mostly through word of mouth, and a lot of it is looking for requests for proposals or for artists, or you can just find there's always cities looking for murals. So I spend a lot of my time pitching for those, and you win some and you lose some. So this is what we use Creative Suite for heavily, is for our pitching process and our mural conceptualization process. But once we're actually at the wall, we are totally focused with an actual physical paint and getting our hands dirty, which is something we really love to do as well.
Mm-hmm. So why don't we get started by By walking through, we're going to open up Adobe Acrobat Pro here. So back in December, we saw a call to artists from the city of Guelph in Ontario. It's about, an hour outside of Toronto?
It's 45 minutes,
45
I would
minutes?
say, west of Toronto.
Yeah, and they put out this call for artists because they had 4 available walls in the downtown core by the farmers market, and they were looking for artists to actually apply to paint these works. So we had just moved into the region about 6 months prior to this call, so we were heavy looking for lots of awesome opportunities. You can see these heavily graffitied walls that a downtown core typically would not want to be covered in graffiti at all times.
Hi, everyone just joining us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So we put out, we thought, you know what, this is a great opportunity to get our name into the local region, but we also had a chance to actually go through the city of Guelph, walk through the area, and thought that it would be a great spot to pitch a piece for our artwork on. So you can see this is called an RFP, request for proposal. These happen all the time. So whatever city you are living in, you can go to the regional websites typically, and you can sign up for mailing lists in your own region to get notified when call for artists actually happen. So Steve and I are on probably 10 to 20 of those lists in a number of regional areas around us, but also in cities that we would just love to go paint in. So you never really know what opportunities are going to
Like
come
San
to us.
Francisco?
Yeah,
Lots of beautiful artwork here.
There are a lot of walls here in San Francisco that might want a little bit of Pell on them. So this one came in. We saw an article post on this one. We then had a friend who lives in our same town point us to this opportunity and decided to apply.
So what we then do is, this is where Creative Suite comes in. So in this case, I use Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign all in conjunction with each other. InDesign to package the package together, Illustrator to create things like vector logos and certain typographic elements, things like this, and Photoshop for the actual concept itself. So the first part of the RFP response is to just simply respond with everything they're looking for. So for example, entry checklist, application form, letter of intent, artist resume, support materials and documentation list, letter of intent, all this kind of stuff. And then our artist resume.
Client list, work featured in, testimonials. These lists are very comprehensive.
Yep, and then our portfolio, just to show them that we do have some experience and we're deadly serious about the project. So then they go through a process where they have to select between a very large pool of artists, because RFPs always have a very large response time. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something like 232 submissions in this case. So it takes a while for them to go through them all, because there is a lot of incredible artwork coming in, a lot of incredible artists such as yourselves pitching for these things. And it's a competitive industry. So in my case, I think one of the things that I do is I really try to make my documents very neat, very clean. I think that conveys a sense of seriousness, a sense of professionalism. And I take a lot of pride in pitching in a very professional and clean kind of way. And in the end, we did get shortlisted of one of 3 for the wall that they selected us for, which then gives us an opportunity to pitch come up with an idea and actually pitch it. Then it's between us and 2 other artists, at which point they select the artist, and then whichever artist wins the RFP gets the project. And it's a long process. It's a 6 to 8 month process going through that. Yes. But I think now it's time for some chat and win. What do you think?
Yeah, we're counting down 23 seconds. I'd like to see this chat window get lively. This is, I love the patterns. Thought you were well out. Yeah, this is great. We got someone from India here.
Yeah.
This is great. So who wants to win some stickers?
From Sticker Mule.
It's Sticker Mule time.
So chat and win some stickers from Sticker Mule.
What are you going to make stickers of?
Let's do this.
I can't wait.
Welcome back.
That was a lot of action in that chat window for sticker winning.
They're awesome stickers. I mean, I wish I could win. But to everyone just joining us, I'm Steve Pell. This is my partner, my wife, Sandy Pell, and we are here to teach you how to use Creative Suite to pitch, win, and eventually paint murals for indoor and outdoor purposes. And let's continue. Mm-hmm. So what we were talking about before Chat and Win was the responding to RFPs, trying to win. So in this case, we were shortlisted to 3 artists, and they gave us an opportunity to pitch for the project. So this is where I really use Photoshop again, Illustrator.
Oh, we got a winner.
Oh, we got a winner.
Marissa! Marissa, you have won stickers. Please tell us what stickers you're going to make because I want to see. Look at all those fun stickers.
Oh my gosh, that's very cool.
Instagram
Congratulations,
stickers.
Marissa.
Yay,
Congratulations.
Marissa! I think Marissa's been in this chat before I recognize her name.
Well, you should say her last name too.
Marissa Meyer. Who's the winner? You are!
You are.
Woo! And for those of you who have not won stickers, we do have a promo for you to win stickers. You can win if you go to stickermule.com/Adobe Live 19. There is a deal there for you to get 10 stickers for $1. Those are 10 stickers, 3x3 inch die cut stickers from Sticker Mule. So once you do win, you're gonna hear a private message come through your chat on Behance. So just keep your eye out, and we're gonna get those announced soon.
Awesome. So what we want to show you now is the actual pitch that we pitched for this Guelph project, which we do use Photoshop. So in this case, we will go visit the site. We will take some photos of the site, measure the proportions of the wall. That way we know how large it is, and then create this pitch document. So you can see, again, I try to keep my documents as clean and as typographically friendly as possible, so it's easy to digest, because it is a fairly complicated process and there's a lot going on here. I just want people to be able to consume it easily and quickly. So this is kind of what the wall looks like. And so here was our proposed artwork that we designed in Photoshop. Mm-hmm. So Guelph is typically known as the Royal City because I believe Guelph is the last name of the British royal family, or some of the British royal family. And so we thought, how can we pay homage to the Royal City? So, I mean, Monarch Butterfly, right? Monarch being a very royal name. And so that's what we thought. And then we want to paint this large Monarch wings, but we don't just want to paint a big pair of wings. We actually want you to stand in front of them. So that's the ultimate goal here, is for people to visit the site and to take pictures of themselves in front of this. And the goal is to bring people to the area, to the neighborhood. And in this case, this site is located right next to a market. So they want people to come into the market, to come take pictures in front of the market itself. There were 3 other very cool murals going in the neighborhood as well.
Yeah, you could actually pull up that newspaper article. If we get a little bit of time.
For sure. And then, so this is our pitch, and it just covers everything that they asked for as neatly and cleanly as possible. It kind of shows the timeline. So this one is actually due in a couple of weeks, and we're very excited to actually work on this because we're going to put incredible amounts of detail into it. It's going to look very cool. So stay tuned for that. And they picked us. They picked our design because they really liked the idea of the interactivity, and the idea of us wanting to bring people into that marketplace, into that neighborhood. So that's how we landed that. Mm-hmm. But there was a lot that went into it before that point. So this is sort of what we want to walk you through now, is how did we use Creative Cloud to actually create all of this. And let's get
Yeah,
started.
let's get that Photoshop file open. We've got a couple questions here. Do you write your own copy from Daniel? We do write our own copy. I have not been a confident writer in my early career, but now I love writing. So more practice on writing copy, the better that you do get on it. The copy stage, I realize, is the most, it's equally as important as the final art. That narrative and that storytelling aspect actually communicates your story so much. So we absolutely do write all of our own copy. We typically read each other's to proof for typos and walk through it a number of times. And yeah, a little bit of practice and it goes a long way.
Glenn has a question. What equipment am I using here? This here is called a Wacom Cintiq. This one here is the 22 HD model. It has a resolution of 1920 by 1080. It is an amazing device. It allows me, you can kind of see the pen here and my awesome glove, to draw directly on the screen, which allows my hand-eye coordination to be just like I was drawing on a piece of paper or anything else. It is an invaluable tool. Absolutely recommend to everybody. You don't have to buy a Wacom Cintiq. You can get Cintiq or iPad Pros. You can get Microsoft Surfaces. There are all kinds of awesome pen display tools now. And for if you're an illustrator, I highly recommend them. Using a Wacom Intuos tablet or a mouse is still a very good option and a great way of doing it. But in my case, I just love the speed and the accuracy of drawing directly on the screen.
We've got one more question here. Amount of detail in proposals, Mike is asking. Mike, I would say, so proposals typically ask for a certain number of pages max. So the more efficient you can be, typically our proposal drafts are always longer when we first draft them, and then they get shorter and shorter and more concise, so that by the end, when we actually submit the final proposal, we have crammed max power into every word that's in that thing.
Yep.
So cut all the words that don't matter. Make sure that your narrative is strong, your story is strong, and that you've included as much detail as possible to meet that word count.
Absolutely. I mean, as the saying goes, less is more, and it really is. But you want each word and everything to have power. And the thing is, people don't necessarily, especially when you're getting, say, 203 submissions, the attention span just isn't there, so you have to make an impact quickly. This is why I like creating nice, clean, simple, and concise documents to communicate that message as clean and quickly as possible to try to grab people's attention. I mean, there is an element here where there is personal taste in people's style, so you might pitch for a project where your style just isn't compatible. But in some cases, it is compatible. So to be able to communicate that message clearly, I think is very important. And again, the Creative Suite is king at that. Like the ability, like I love snapping tools, for example. It allows me to create really great rhythm or smart guides and things like this. Like, man, without that, it would take me a lot longer to do these things because you kind of have to line it up manually and stuff like that to create your rhythm. But these tools have come so far in the last 20, 30 years that they're just unbelievable now. They almost designed for you. They're amazing.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about the City of Guelph project here.
Sure.
So you can see a pretty tempting wall for graffiti artists.
Yep, this is what the wall looked like initially. This is, when is this, December?
This is December, yeah.
In Canada before the snow.
Before the snow hit. It's very cold this day. I do have a photo of me actually.
So we come in, so the process here is we'll come, take a photo of the space, and then I might come in and, I will come in and then measure it. So I would measure the width and kind of create a grid system, a quick grid system over it just to kind of see how it works. So in this case, I'm going to use the line tool and just create a really quick grid system. And why I want to create this grid system is because I want to see where elements can line up. And then you can start identifying where key things intersect. And where key things intersect, like for example in the center here, or you can do subdivide it this way, right? And then again subdivide it like this. I'm just doing it very quickly. Normally I would be much more careful about the precision of this process. But what you're going to start seeing is these points here start intersecting. And then I start filling those in with lines. And then I just go through this process a couple of times until I've narrowed down and subdivided the canvas. I call this a canvas, but this wall. So I can kind of identify where points of interest geometrically based on the proportions of the wall are located. What I mean by that is if you subdivide your grid like this, then the grid speaks to the proportion of the wall. And if you place elements within that proportion of the wall, you create a really clean rhythm. You don't notice it consciously, you do notice it unconsciously, but this underlying grid system is what sets the rhythm to the entire piece. And if we line things up to the grid system, well, keeping in mind that we want to break the grid system for visual interest, it gives us a very good starting point on exactly where to place things. So that's why the width and the height, so the proportion of the piece itself, is very, very important at this point in our process.
Someone is complimenting your perfectly named and organized layers.
Oh, thank you very much.
This is Noor. Thank you very much.
Well, that's not the right color. There we go.
There we go.
That's better.
Yeah, so this is it's very important to get the measurements on site. We do have a little kit in our car that travels with us all the time. It's got a tape measure in it. It's got a level in it. It's got some basic tools so that when and if we are on site, we can take very detailed measurements so that these grid systems are accurate once we get home. Do you have a rough size of this wall?
This wall here is 12 feet wide by 5 feet 8 inches tall.
Good. So it's a good size wall.
It's a pretty good size wall. It's great for taking interactive selfies in front of them. That's why we thought of that idea. We've done it a few times, to be fair. A really large one in Vancouver, Canada, which sort of inspired us to try it again here in Guelph. But because this wall is smaller, we thought it would be a really great place to create something like that. And because it's right next to a market, it can help drive foot traffic to the market. And so that's our ultimate goal here. And I think that's what the city really appreciated about it, was the ability to drive traffic in there. And then you can see graffiti here. The other really strong thing about street art is it helps cut down on crime. And people will tag these pieces of art still, but you will cover them with an anti-graffiti spray, so that way you can remove them when they do get tagged. But then eventually the taggers will give up and they'll stop tagging that area. And then the general public goes into the area because there's no graffiti there. They're not intimidated to go there. And it becomes a place where people congregate and can actually enjoy themselves. And it helps create things like culture and community and stuff like that. And that was kind of central to our pitch. That's our ultimate goal here.
Just a quick note for those of you who haven't registered for the daily challenge today. At the top of your chat window there is a challenge button. We're going to be doing some design feedback countdown in about 46 minutes and 50 seconds. So get registered. We'd love to see what you're working on. That was Voodoo Val's challenge from this morning. So pop your art in there. Let's take a look.
Yeah, let's take a look. I'm very excited to see what you come up with. And people like our layers palette. Thank you. I don't know about you, but if my layers are not named and organized, trying to find layers named like layer copy 0087523,
Yes.
I don't know what that means. So I have to name them so I have a general idea on what's in them. Like, for example, the vignette layer. It's a vignette, right? It's super easy to know that. I mean, I can see it in the thumbnail, but it's easier to be able to read it as well.
That's great.
So the process here, we come in, we'll take photos and measure the space. That's that's step number one in our process. Then the second step of our process is taking some scale. So here's Sandy all bundled up in front of the wall. She's about 5'5" tall, so that gave us a pretty good idea on how large the wall was and a basic idea on where we should place the wings that we're interested in. And you can see, I'll skip ahead a little bit, but when I go to the interactivity layer, you'll note that I sized the little silhouette here to be roughly the same size as her. I stepped her out a little bit because I think people would step out from the wall, but just to give us a basic idea on size.
Yeah, so
and then sorry to interrupt.
I was just going to say, so sizing helps us with one of the biggest questions we get is how do we put together cost for our artwork, which depends very much on size.
Yep.
It's a big part of the estimate process.
Absolutely. So you'll see in this case, for part of this pitch process, creating the actual concept itself, I will use Photoshop. I'll use the clone tool in this instance to eliminate. You can see it's really rough. It's not really well done. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be, I think, good enough to look somewhat believable. And eliminate the graffiti that way. We can start overlaying some of the elements that were part of the technical challenge of this. And I'll get to that in a minute. And then I also want to kind of tone down the surrounding photograph, because this is just shot on a cell phone, so there's no like bokeh or anything like that, no depth of field. So it's all very crisp and clean. So if I add a vignette, then I can kind of focus in on the area that I want my client to focus in on, and just totally to ignore the surrounding, because it's not as important. In this case, we are not painting directly on the wall. In this case, we are painting on metal panels that will be installed on the wall. So what we'll do is get the size of these metal panels. In this case, they are 4 feet by 5 foot 8 inches tall, and there are 3 of them. So you can see me basically overlaying them here to get an idea on basically how large they could be on the panel, or on the wall, sorry.
So once we leave the site, we head back to our studio. The next step is really putting together the estimate for the client. If it's not an RFP, in this case, this was an RFP, so we had a budget set up in advance, but in many cases, once you do get the measurements, we have to figure out what to do in order to put a proper estimate together. So a lot of that process, before we take on a project, we do a ton of research on the brand, the employees, the staff, everyone who has a part of that art or will engage in that art. It all becomes part of the actual concepts and design for the pictures that we're putting together, and it's important to take the audience into consideration when you're designing, especially in this case, like this is public art. This is not in an office like Adobe. This is in the streets, and everyone has access to this art, meaning that there's a lot of factors you have to consider.
Absolutely.
So we do, from that point on, we are putting together an estimate for the client. We put together a story based on some rough ideas. We talk about vision. We talk about different proposal ideas for them. And at this point in our art practice we don't like to do too much work without getting a proper secure of the contract in advance from the client. So we do put together the proposal, send them an estimate, and if they do want to move forward with that art, in our practice we have now established a 50% down in order to move forward with the art. And that seems to work well to, I'd say, weed out serious clients and commit time in a calendar. So we're booking right now a few months out in advance, meaning that if you're interested in quotes, that's great, but if you want to actually move forward, it does take a commitment to do so.
For sure. So in this case, when we have established the idea we want, so we knew we wanted to do a pair of butterfly wings. So it's like, okay, now what? What do we do? So the first thing we will do is we'll do a lot of research on butterflies themselves, because we're not butterfly experts. We honestly don't really know much about them. So this is where we have to start researching to understand what we're doing. Like, what is a butterfly? What kind of patterns does it have on? Why does it have those patterns? What does a male versus female look like? There are a lot of things to think about, at least for us, because we want to try to, we design in an abstract way, but we want to at least stay true to some things. Like, for example, we want the patterns on the butterflies to be at least realistic to the real thing, and even if it's in an abstract way. So we'll go to Pinterest, we'll go to Behance, we'll go to any resource we can get to. So we can go to Adobe Stock, find really great images of butterflies and stuff like that. Where is the...
End it live, yeah. Yeah, we've built out some mood boards here. Steve's very, very active on his Behance. He's constantly updating these mood boards, which is incredible for reference and access, and when we need inspiration. We do use Pinterest as well. And Adobe Stock Library is a great backup if you're looking for assets that you can't capture on your own. We did have a question come in earlier. I can't remember who asked it, but they were asking if we shoot our own photographs. We actually, Steve well, you can tell the story, but we got into photography years ago because we needed assets and we couldn't find them. So we figured, you know what, let's go shoot them ourselves.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a cheap way of doing it, and you have total control over how you want the image to look. I mean, it all depends if you need certain models and stuff like that. That complicates the process, but in a case like this, we can easily take our own photographic asset and utilize it. So we'll use Adobe libraries, and you'll see here, for example, butterflies. And then we'll have a whole bunch of butterfly inspiration, essentially, that we can utilize if we need, or
so
when we're researching Guelph itself, like, well, what is Guelph? What defines Guelph? Like, what are their qualities? And that helps us also kind of come up with an idea. So in this case, again, the Monarch for the Royal City Wings, it just made sense to us. So that's why we ended up going in that direction. We use Pinterest a lot as well. I'd say for creating quick mood boards and inspiration, in my case, Google image search or Pinterest is a good tool to use. Behance is an excellent tool to use. It's a little bit different, but you get to see some excellent examples of what you're searching for. Adobe Stock is an incredible resource because you have really high quality assets that you can use in your project. And so you can find a really great reference of a Monarch, for example, and buy that stock image and utilize it and just have an incredible high resolution, amazing piece of reference to use. So I highly recommend that as well.
You know what my favorite piece of reference was recently is I found a monarch butterfly on the sidewalk the other day, and unfortunately that butterfly is no longer with us, but it worked to be incredible resource information for me to draw from. Like, what better thing than to work off live.
Paulie has a question on how to join and save this challenge.
How do I join and save this challenge? So if you go into the challenge at the top of the screen beside the chat window, you can drop in there and register for the challenge. Then I encourage you to join us over at Discord. That's where we've got our results from the challenge posting. So in 37 minutes, we're going to be reviewing the chat responses that have come in, the design creative challenges for the, I believe it's fantasy tools. So it's going to be a fun one to review. So if you're just joining now, definitely register for the daily challenge. We're really looking forward to seeing the results that come in on that one. And again, that's just to the right side of the chat info and challenge window on your Adobe Live screen. Did you take the dead butterfly or just photograph it? I did take the wing home because you know what? Honestly, it's the best thing to draw from is wild real life. I do a lot of leaf collecting as well, especially in the fall. The autumn in Ontario has beautiful orange and red leaves that fall down, so I grabbed a number of those as well. You can press them in textbooks, and it's just so accessible to draw from real life, or at least draw from photos that we've shot on our own for reference to actually get exactly what we're looking for.
Absolutely. So now that we've kind of got an idea on what we want to do, we know we want a pair of Monarch butterfly wings. We know why we want a pair of Monarch butterfly wings. Now we need to know, what does that look like? So in this case, you'll notice behind here, especially in the summer, this is just green and full of foliage. It looks really, really nice. So we thought, why not carry that theme throughout the piece? So you can see here, we'll go around the neighborhood. We'll take pictures of local flowers and things like this, and design something similar to this. You can, let me see if I can remove this mask real quick. Design a piece like this, which takes into account all the local, like by local, I mean like within 100 meter or 100-foot radius of where we're at, and kind of use that as inspiration for the background. In this case, because this is just a concept, the final background will look a lot different. It will follow more of the contours of the wings and stuff like that, but this is just for conceptualization purposes. So it does not have to be perfect. It just has to communicate your message. And so we design, again, let me show you. We'll design this piece quickly to kind of allow us to conceptualize what could the background look like. Basically, you want to tie this and this together, and because we like abstraction, we don't necessarily want to be overly literal, but we want you to get a sense that they're related in some way. And then the next step on top of that is to begin just sketching out quick sketches, quick ideas like, well, what the heck should the wings look like? And this is where the fun really begins because, well, I can show you an example of one project we did where we did many, many iterations of, let's say, a pair of wings. You can see here.
Takes a lot of fails to get the win.
So here's the wing. Let me see if I can zoom in real quick on that.
You can zoom in there, yeah.
So there's the final iteration, but you can see all of the iterations that we did go through until eventually we took, let's say, elements from this piece and elements from this piece and elements from this piece and then create this final piece here. And what that eventually does, I can show you the final piece where that is implemented. And here we are. Once we have our final illustration, then we can move forward with it and actually get that on the wall. And in this case, this was very similar to the Guelph project that we're doing now, the butterfly wings. And you can kind of see how the interaction works. Like people will take pictures of themselves in front of the mural and then tag it. In this case, this is called Kit's Wings because this is in a neighborhood called Kitsilano in Vancouver, British Columbia.
This is a big one now on Instagram as well. So the Kids Wings hashtag, when we decided to put this piece together, it just took on a life of its own. We've had celebrities in front of it. We've had films now produce film sets in front of it. We've had all sorts of people jumping and dogs, and it's crazy. If you look at that hashtag on Instagram, Kids Wings, it's pretty incredible. Every so often I check it out just to see what the latest is. And
so the hashtag in this case is Kids Wings.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
We can quickly show you the process on how this particular mural was created. It's a very similar process to what we're showing you now. But again, measure the space, and in this case, the wall is really awkwardly shaped. So it's like, we can't really create perfect symmetry here, but we can use as much symmetry as humanly possible. We're gonna have a little bit of a flaw there, but I'm okay with that. So we go through the process, and then we eventually come up with this final design. This is the final design we will use to move forward with the actual artwork itself. And then once the artwork is complete, then you'll see here
it just comes to life.
It just goes on and on and on. Like, it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So how do we, obviously this one is a live color for Monarch butterfly is typically orange, black, white, but we do work with color choices that are quite specific in the work that we've done. You'll notice there is obviously a lot of heavy line work on it, typically a lot of black and white and color accents, also very heavy use of metallics as well. Yeah. One thing that Steve and I started exploring a couple of years back is actually when you look at different paint, if you guys have ever been to the paint store, you can get matte paint, and I'm just talking your local hardware store. You can get matte paint, you can get eggshell finish, you can get high gloss, and when you're doing murals of this size, you can really have fun to your advantage with the different paints that come in. So typically, we'll do, for example, a matte or an eggshell background, but then if we do a high gloss line work on top of a matte finish paint, and then we add a couple metallics, like this is a great example that Steve's pulled up. These eyes in the background, they look like it looks like a gradation there of yellow to orange, but what you're actually seeing there is one color of paint. It's called Bright Gold by Golden, and shot at different angles in this room, it has the most reflectant properties.
Sorry to interrupt, but I was just going to say I can show them another example of how the metallics interact and why we love them so much, because at different times of day and in different lighting and stuff like that, the mural actually changes the way it looks just a little bit because of how the metallics react with the incoming light. So one very cool project that we did was another butterfly mural, and we are very fond of wildlife and nature, so that's something central to our style, is where we're big believers in creating an experience that are ubiquitous to everybody, and it doesn't offend anybody, and everyone can enjoy it on an equal level, and that's very important to us. So we love abstraction as a result, and just beautiful symmetrical patterns. Not always symmetrical, but in the majority of the cases they are. So again, you can kind of see the process a little bit here. Measure the space, visit the site, research what we want to do. You can see very quick, very quick sketches. This is just us trying to figure out how we want to lay the composition out. Absolutely no thought on anything but how to use color. So you can see it's so abstract, but these yellow chunks are gold. And these black lines are supposed to be black details, but it hasn't gotten there yet. You can see us sort of iterating ourselves through the process.
This process it's allowed to be messy. This is something that a lot of artists get stuck on, is scroll up a little bit there. Look at these 3 images and how different they are from one another. Like, this is pure iterative design happening, in this case, on a sketchbook, and then eventually moving here to digital, and then its final was also done in digital.
Yep.
And this is all hand-drawn on a Wacom Cintiq, just
on
like
a device just like this.
Yep, just like this, and all using the paintbrush tool. So there's no replication, there's no copy pasting here. It's literally, imagine you have a piece of paper and a pencil in front of you with a number of different rulers and lines and grids, and this is what can happen.
And we do use Photoshop for this process. This here was designed in Photoshop, but we also design it in extremely high resolution for a few reasons. One, it allows me to transfer it into Illustrator, so I can, it takes a long time, but I can trace it and have very accurate line work. But the other reason is so we can print it in very high resolutions if we want to frame a version of it, let's say, in our home. And being able to print at, say, 300 dpi at maybe 24 inches wide by, say, 18 inches tall or something like that. It's just so crisp. It looks really, really nice. And I think you can see, we really love fine detail and precision.
Mm-hmm. Dana's asking, how do you execute these murals? Are you hand painting them? Are you hand painting from your designs or transferring them somehow?
Excellent question. Actually, I can show you that with this project. So let me step back for a second. So again, we will go to the site, take a photo of it, meet the client, kind of figure out what they're looking for. In this case, this is a tech company called Allocadia, and their theme is transformation. So they use a butterfly as a metaphor for the transformation of their business processes. So that gives us an idea on the direction to head. So in this case, transforming butterflies was kind of central to our minds. So I'll go through and then I'll measure the space and kind of create this document. That way I can later, so this document here was created in Illustrator. As you can see, it's just very precise. It's very simple, but that allows me to then print it, as you can see here and here, and just quickly sketch over top of it. You can do it digitally, you can print out the piece of paper, you do it however you want. It's totally up to you. And then just continue to refine and refine and refine until you get to a point to say this point. So this image here is the one that we pitch to the client themselves, because we're not going to spend time creating a final polished piece, because that takes a very, very long time. And those of you who have potentially done that in the past, where you've created a final piece for a client, and then your client comes back to you and says, you know what, why don't you add some Comic Sans here instead? Like, that would look really cool. So then you're like, oh my gosh, I gotta add Comic Sans there? Like,
or can you move all those butterflies to the left? And it's like, that would take a long time.
That would take a long time.
Obviously, you can see the complexity of the style of artwork we do. Making changes in final art can be a pretty time-consuming process.
So once the client approves it, that's the most important part. They'll approve this quick sketch, and we'll then go and create a final version of that artwork, which we spend a lot of time thinking about things like grid systems and proportions and just the general layout. So in an example here, as you'll notice, the top corner here comes down and meets the center here. So you can kind of see the rhythm flowing a little bit, right?
Yeah.
What it also reminiscent of, at least to me, is the sun. It's also a bit reminiscent of, say, a sunflower. Mm-hmm. It could be reminiscent to anything that you want. I mean, everybody's experience is different, but for me, that's kind of what I was going for here. So the installation process, to answer your question, is once we have this digital artwork complete and the client's happy with it, we will then go to the site and actually paint it on the wall. So you can see, potentially, let me see if I can zoom in here real quick.
We'll print out.
You can see, whoops.
Day one.
This is a printout. This is actually the Photoshop composite that I presented to the client. So it is pretty accurate to what the final piece will look like. And that's why it's very important to measure the space and the proportions in advance. That way, when you are on site, you do not have to think about anything. You just work, you just do, because the actual painting part is very time consuming, and you'd think it would be tedious, and it is a little bit at first, but eventually you just move into the flow of the moment, and that's where the enjoyment, in my opinion, begins, getting into that flow. And so in this case, we come to the wall, we have all our materials ready to go, and we'll use a projector in this case so we can quickly sketch the image onto the wall, which takes quite a while. This took, I think, a day and a half to quickly sketch onto the wall.
Yeah, a lot of lines in there.
So you can see basic quick sketching here. And here's day 2, same thing. Basic quick sketching. And then, so here's the result of the basic quick sketch. It's hard to see, but a lot of these lines are very, very rough. They do not look good. You would not want to present this to your client, or they would be upset. And again, this is for us where the fun begins. We absolutely love spending time polishing.
I love this part.
So here's the beautiful metallic gradient that we decided to use for this piece. And ultimately, why I'm bringing this project up is to show you the properties of metallic paint. And here's Sandy, just really in the flow of things.
I'm so in the zone here.
But you can start to see here some of the metallic properties with a flat black paint. Mm-hmm. So the flat black kind of sucks into the wall, stays in the background, but the metallics just explode off the wall. It's really hard to see it in photos. That's the real shame of it, but in person, it has a life of its own, and it looks very cool. And again, you can kind of see some of the metallic properties reflecting, but the matte black stays nice and dark.
We got some good questions coming in when you're ready. We got, did you draw only one triangular segment then repeat it? The answer is no. This actually took, every butterfly on this wall is a unique butterfly. When we were showing you those mood boards earlier through Pinterest and Adobe Stock and some of the Behance mood boards, we collect a lot of butterfly assets to actually create these pieces. So every butterfly on this wall is unique and original, and that was part of the customer journey process that this company goes through, is celebrating the growth. So you can see in the beginning of the sunflower here, this is designed to look like a very junior customer, very new on board, and then moving out throughout the customer journey until they're a very complex, mature customer with the organization, which you can see mimicked here by the crazy amount of detail in that final large butterfly.
There's a good question here. Is the same bright gold paint in the center of the flower? If by flower you mean here, mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So this is gold, it's gold, and then it's gold mixed with a little bit of green, mm-hmm. and then gold mixed with a little bit more green, and so on and so forth, till it's just metallic green.
Yeah, and this was a creative opportunity as well, because that green that you see in the very final butterfly is actually the brand green, which we were talking a little bit earlier about selecting the color palette. So this particular company had a brand green as that we wanted to mix with the metallic gold. So eventually we work out to having that take over.
So I'd like to show you a little bit how the metallics work in our process. So here's a very crazy mural that we did. This here is a Star Wars battle scene in in A New Hope. I mean, there's some ships here that you may not have seen in A New Hope, so please forgive me, Star Wars fans. But the idea is you're getting blasted by the Death Star, and this is sort of the last thing you see before you are vaporized. And so it's kind of like a psychedelic experience a little bit, but using some fun geometry to create some visual noise a little bit here in the corners, and where it's connecting, and that's where the battle is happening. So again, dimensions, quick sketch, and then actually installing this mural in a very similar way. But what I want to show you with this piece is Let me see. There's one good photo. There we go. Here's a good photo of what I'm trying to communicate here. You can see how this is in an office on like a 19th floor, say, so it has solid glass windows all the way around it. So you can see how at a certain time of day, this was kind of early in the morning, how the light reflects off of it. And that's what we really liked about it is we can create some pretty interesting effects just by using reflective paint in conjunction with, say, fluorescent paints or with just matte black paints on, say, a matte white wall or a satin wall or satin white wall or whatever. But we want the metallics to really stand out and to kind of create some visual interest. And in this case, it's hard to see, but it looks like a gradient. This is not a painted gradient. This is just actually the way the light reflects off of it. Same thing. So this is the final work. This piece was very large, about 35 feet wide or something like that, by about 12 feet tall. And
that was a 2-weekend project.
it was, yeah, this was a 2-weekend project.
A 5-day total. We tried to get this all done in one shot, but
so you can see some basic details, just simple like basic sketching, right? Like we're not necessarily focused on perfect accuracy. We love the just imperfection of it. There's a Japanese way of looking at it called wabi-sabi. I recommend looking it up. WABI-SABI. Absolutely love the thinking behind that. But the imperfection for me is the beauty. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, we got a question here. Are you sore after painting all those angles? How do you deal with painting fatigue?
That is a very good question.
It's quite funny because I think Steve and I are so used to diving into this process that we push ourselves really far, really far. Why don't talk about some of the hours that we're working on these pieces?
So for us, especially when we're painting in, say, a corporate tech office, we don't want to interrupt the operations of the business. So we'll come in, say, Friday night at around 5 p.m. as everybody is leaving, and that's when we'll start transposing our image onto the wall after everybody's left. And hopefully we'll have that done that night. But we don't leave till around 2 or 3 a.m. because it does take quite a while to do. And then we'll come in really early the next day on Saturday after maybe 3 or 4 hours sleep, start around 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and probably work another 14 hours. I mean, we'll take breaks and have lunch and dinner and things like this, of course. But we'll continue working, and then we'll come in again on Sunday with the same schedule until we have completed it. And if we haven't completed it that weekend, we'll come in the following weekend and follow that process. But ultimately, we'll work maybe 14 hours a day between the two of us. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, we can motivate each other because we're working with each other and we enjoy each other's company and we have good synergy, I think. And it's just an enjoyable time to spend together. So I think that for us, that's the motivating thing. It's a great way to spend time together and to create art together and to create a strong relationship and to create some cool art at the same time. So it does take really long hours, but at the end of the day, it's quality time, and it's just, I don't know how to describe it. It feels really good. Like you feel really good when you're done. It's like you do something really difficult. You have an ambitious goal to achieve, and then when you achieve it, that's when the reward comes. I mean, the process is painful, but at the end,
and mentally, yes.
That's when the reward comes in. It's like you got to work through it until that last part. So, at the end, you kind of suck up the pain, and it's like, I mean, you don't have to be crazy like us. You can work over several months if you want, but we just like finishing it quickly.
We like rapid execution. Tiana says our chemistry is great. I can tell you both work really well together. You complement each other so well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's a nice compliment.
That's very nice. For those of you just joining as well, I'm Sandy. This is Steve. We have a business painting large-scale commercial murals together called Pellvetica. It's just here on the laptop. If you do want to follow us on Instagram or Behance, you can check out all of our work as well as Pellvetica.com. So we're just walking you through how we use the Adobe Creative Suite today to take small pieces of art and execute them on very large walls using tools that Adobe makes, Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign, to be able to scale these small drawings fast. People typically ask us how long we're painting these murals, and the short answer is typically 2 to 4 days, depending on the size of the piece that we're working on. So obviously that's a huge, Photoshop. We couldn't do this without the Adobe Creative Suite. It's completely integral to our process.
Absolutely. I mean, I absolutely love the software, and I'm very honored to be here with Adobe to help walk you guys through our process and get your feedback and to see what you think, and hopefully encourage some of you to say, hey, maybe I can paint a mural. Maybe I should go try. And the answer is yes, you absolutely should. It is a lot of fun, and it doesn't matter if you don't do a good job at first, because you're going to get better and better at it. You just have to go out and do it. That's the thing. You can't have doubt. You just go and do. That's the best advice I can give you, is just do it.
Yeah, we've definitely just gone and done a lot of these murals. We're given, if you see these murals, even the ones on the screen here, every time Steve and I take on a new project, there is literally the most unfathomable challenges that come out of nowhere. When we're obviously doing a site visit on the wall, we're shooting the photos, we're doing the grids, we're doing the conversations on vision and outlook for the piece. But once we get on that physical site, there are things that pop up that Adobe doesn't typically, Photoshop doesn't capture in our planning process. So there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of key learnings. There's a lot of things that we do not anticipate throughout this creative process that we work on together.
One thing I'd love to share with you as well is, you'll notice that a lot of our work is very, very simple line art. We are attempting to move down this direction where we add more rendering effects. So you can see from this series of Star Wars illustrations that we created, you have your basic line art, but then how can we envision it rendered in? So this is sort of the answer to that question. And we want to start painting murals with this amount of rendered effects. So this is Kylo Ren, interpreted in our own way and in a somewhat abstract manner, but just using beautiful patterns, and it's just fun to create repeating patterns and just to see how it could potentially turn out. And so you can kind of see how it turns out. So we'll use airbrushes and potentially spray paint for outdoor especially, or even just acrylic paint to try to capture these gradient effects on the wall. But we haven't actually created a mural like this yet. These are just digital illustrations that we created for available prints and stuff like that. But anyhow, you can see kind of the evolution on where we would like to head. And you can kind of see it again here with our West Coast Wildlife series of the direction that we want to head with these murals. Is the more that we practice, the more ideas that come to mind, and the more techniques we want to practice. So in my case, I really want to do something like, let me try and pop one up. I want to do something like this on a wall. I don't know about you, but I think that would be very cool, especially if maybe you stood in the middle here because it was a really large piece. But oh man, I really want to go down that road. But one step at a time.
Standing there.
I'll be killer. We should probably get back to the Guelph.
We should get back to the Guelph, which we're so excited about all this conceptualizing.
All these great questions, especially about metallic paints and stuff like that. So thanks for joining us and for all your feedback and for your questions. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, we've got 11 minutes for you to join the design feedback countdown for the creative challenge that went out this morning. So definitely get your pieces posted up in the discourse feed, and we're going to take a look at those in 11 minutes. So we're really excited to see what you have to say.
Dana has a very good point. It would be heartbreaking when someone tags public art, and that does happen all the time.
That has happened.
But you do have one weapon at your disposal. You can have something called anti-graffiti spray sprayed on your wall. And then when someone does come by and tag it, the company who sprayed it with anti-graffiti spray can literally just wipe it off and then just reapply the anti-graffiti spray. So there are weapons and tools to help combat tagging and graffiti. And it is a problem, and you can't escape it, but you have tools at your disposal. So I wouldn't let that discourage you from trying, because it's just the part of having public street art. You can't escape it, unfortunately.
So we had a question earlier, the biggest challenge of creating murals, which I think segues nicely into getting a little bit dirty on making concept art. So we do a lot of work digitally, but when we paint, we protect our clothing. So I wear this crazy mural, which, oh, look at this. Oh, look at this. It's covered in paint. Steve and I have matching aprons that we got maybe a year ago, and look at this thing already. It's incredible.
It saved lots of clothing.
One of the funny things about when we wear them together is the fact that mine is completely covered in paint and Steve's is like very clean. I think it has a lot to do with our balance and contrast of our working styles.
Our working methods, yeah.
But yeah, I think we should pop back into Photoshop and just review some of those comps that we put together. Are you pulling? This is great. This is my apron. This is Steve's apron.
It's still dirty, but
It's it's about to become a mural itself. That's exactly right, eh? We love these aprons. We wear them for all of our dirty projects, and
this is where, in my opinion, the fun is. It's like doing it digitally is a lot of fun and absolutely fantastic, but getting out in the field and getting dirty, getting sweaty, tired, getting sunburns, whatever, that is, I think, where the real fun is.
yeah. We picked up these aprons from another artist over on Granville Island in British Columbia called Search and Rescue Denim, and they're artists in themselves. They create beautiful aprons, and we love wearing them when we're creating, so it's a perfect win.
I highly recommended.
So what do we got here? We have a couple comps here for when we were putting together the piece here. You can see we work in an iterative process. So this initial drawing, this is one of the first concepts that we came up with. The process, here it's very much iterative, where we come up with the first version of the art, and then we refine until we come up with something that looks a little bit more like this. So this process, obviously we're on Adobe Live today. This drawing that you're looking at here, it is concept art, but it's not something that we typically would be able to complete within a 1-hour segment with you. So we are showing you a bit in fast forward on the way that we are working here. If we walk through this concept process, we have shown you different iterative pieces of all of the projects that we have created, but I think we could play a little bit on working this one out. If you do join us tomorrow, we actually are going to be creating final art for this project, so definitely come back tomorrow. We're going to be live from 9:30 to 11:30 Pacific time, and we'd love to walk through that process with you. So the initial concept sketching stage, it is. Someone asked me. I should write down your name. It's off my feed. I can't see it. But they were asking us the biggest challenge of creating murals. Now this is something that I think is a big challenge, at least for me, is actually coming up with concept art. It's painting the mural is the easy part. It really is the easy part, and depending on how many people you have reviewing your art on the other end. I did see a question come in on how you work with different teams on reviewing the art. It can be a very different process. So if you have, for example, one approver of your art on the other end, it can be a much different process than if you have, for example, 3 to 5 approvers on the other end. And we do take that into account when we do sign on a project, because the more cooks in the kitchen, the more opinions that you do have, and the less it can pull away from the art that we like to do, and the more scripted it becomes.
Yeah, the less, this is my opinion, perhaps jaded, but the less art it becomes and the more designy it becomes. It's not art anymore. It's been totally curated by someone else, almost as if they should have just done it themselves. So we don't like working when there's too many people involved in the decision-making process. So we like when there's like maybe 1 or 2 people who we can deal with, and then they make all the decisions, and then they sell that to their constituents or whomever. So back to the actual concept. So one thing I'd love to show you as well is, you'll note that some of our pieces have like a certain rhythm to them, and the way we accomplish that is we create pretty robust grid systems all the time. So in this case, let me shut these wings off. That way you can kind of see the underlying grid system in this case. You'll notice that it's a radial grid that radiates out from the center, and then Sandy has come along and used aspects of that. You'll see here, 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 and so on and so forth to create a rhythm. And then you can create a rhythm based on, let's say, this might get a little complex because this, I think, it goes down the path of theory. But if the wall is, as an example, 4 feet wide by 3 feet tall, that's a 4:3 aspect ratio, right? So we'll then try to use that aspect ratio of 4:3 throughout the piece. So in the case of a grid system like this might have 3 grids and 4 grids respectively. So it always communicates the number 3 and the number 4 throughout the entire piece. This is not a good example, unfortunately, because this is not how I did it here, but I just want to show you that the grid system would technically be created with the proportions of the actual space, like central to the actual final piece. Because what ends up happening is the piece itself, I don't know how to describe it other than it sings. It's like music, right? It speaks to itself. It's as above, so below. It's like fractal geometry. I don't know how to explain it well enough, but that's how I do it. It's like I take the proportions into consideration when creating the actual grid system itself. And then when you do that, it works with itself at any scale. And it's a very complicated thing that I'm trying to explain here, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea on kind of the thinking that's going on here.
I think that was good. That was good. So if you turn back that layer on the final comp, you can see, so this entire drawing here, it was not, it may look complex here. Can you turn off I guess you don't need to turn off the background, but if it's easy to do.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
What I wanted to just show you here is if you peel back the layers on this, like imagine an onion. Like this may look very complex, but in this case, I drew only one wing, for example, and then I was able to duplicate it. So you can now ignore the entire one side. And then, for example, take away all of the orange, red, and yellow. Those are simple paint tool fills that I did. Again, this is all just paintbrush tool. I'm learning Photoshop as we go along, but in this case, I literally just used the paintbrush tool. I filled it in and opened up a new layer and started drawing a basic outline of the black outlines of each of the cells of this particular monarch. So again, we're in layer 2 of the onion here. Layer 3 of the onion moves into using that grid that Steve just had up and putting basic pattern work into align with the center of that grid. So in this case, obviously we want someone to be able to stand in the middle and have their photograph taken. So we decided to put the grid in a position which would radiate from people from, all different heights. You have to consider there's going to be young children standing in front of this piece. There's going to be, 6 foot tall people, 10 foot tall people standing, maybe, maybe. We have to consider all of those when we are making the grid system and where we're going to align that grid and if we want to move it up or down. But in this case, it worked well just to put it right in the center of these monarchs.
I'd like to answer Mike Nash's question. He's asking about me to clarify a little bit what I mean about symmetry of a grid. Do I use a golden mean ratio? I do sometimes. But when you do a golden mean ratio, so the way I would design that is you'd have a circle either constrain the height or a circle constrain the width. The thing about a golden mean ratio is your canvas would actually have to be 1:1, 6.18 to work. So when your proportions are not that ratio will not work unless you crop it a little bit. It'll still work because you will crop it and it'll still look really good because it's using the golden mean ratio, but it's a little bit different than what I'm describing. I'm basically subdividing a space, so let's say 4:3 as the aspect ratio, which does not adhere to the golden mean ratio at all. It subdivides its space on its own just using basic Euclidean geometry.
I love that Steve knows so much about creating grid systems. This is another part of our collaboration is Steve's excellent in the technical scope of setting up our mural projects and commissions in terms of measuring the space, creating these systems, creating that balance, that rhythm, and ultimately making this art sing. So we have 8 seconds, 7, 6, 5. So let's open up Discourse. Let's do that on your monitor because I think it will be easy to pop in there. And we'd like to take a look at your creative challenges from Voodoo Val this morning.
All right, let's see here.
So we've got one open here. So scroll all the way down to the bottom of the feed, and then we can see some of the more recent challenges and then work our way up. So I believe this morning's challenge to Voodoo Val was to create your magical, mystical tool to help you and your avatar through this journey of life. It looks like lots of you have submitted, and these are really
excellent submissions.
Fun. These are really fun. Look, there's Sam.
It's actually quite hard to critique people because there's so much talent out there. It's like, how do you critique someone with such great talent? But we'll do our best.
We will do our best.
Our style and your style may not be the same, so you may agree or disagree with our opinions, but
these are so fun.
yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff here, that's for sure.
Really fun. So this is, I think, where avatars are starting. So maybe let's go down all the way to the bottom, and we'll work our way up.
Sure.
So who's the most recent one to? Okay,
let's see here. This looks new.
You've selected my items. Just need to color them. So this is fun. Yeah, this is great. So line work, obviously, I'm a huge fan of black and white line work. For you, Tan, who has put together the submission, we have a potion, it looks like bag of coins, and some stinky cheese. It's really fun. That's really fun. I would love to see you add color to these. I think that's a great opportunity.
I too would love to see you add color to these. And if I had to add a critique, I personally like lines that are a little more consistent in width, but these look great too. I mean, each person will have their own opinion, but in my opinion, I like width consistency. I like consistency in general, but then have, let's say, for example, because this is bottom heavy, maybe the bottom of it's a little bit thicker than the sides of it, just to kind of add a little bit of visual weight. So it feels like it's kind of sitting on a surface or something like that, maybe projecting a little bit of the shadow, but again, not in a super literal way, more of in an abstract way.
So the challenge challenges everyone to use the pen tool to create icons. So that is there is a function in Photoshop that allows you to change the weight of your pen, right?
If you use certain brushes and stuff like that and stroke them, you can have it stroke skinny to start, kind of get fat in the middle, and then stroke skinny to end again.
So fun. I love it. So yeah, if you end up adding color to this one, Tan, definitely repost it. I would love to see it. It looks great in black and white, but
it's an excellent start. Keep going.
So fun. Okay, we have one here from Sam. A little mystical potion. So what I especially caught my eye here is this mist coming off the top.
Yeah, it looks great.
That's so fun. And your use of the shadow and highlight here, there's a lot of depth happening in this piece, which I think is really fun.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I don't know if I have much critique for it. I mean, if I could nitpick, maybe because you have a light source here, it seems to me, coming down from this corner, maybe have a little bit of a drop shadow that casts a little bit of blue because of this transparent liquid and the transparent glass itself.
It's a good idea.
But again, I'm nitpicking. I'm sure that takes more time. I totally understand that, but it looks great. I think you've done a great job as well.
I love it. I love it. And that's good. I didn't even think of that. The drop shadow is a great idea. So we have a quick bow, really fun challenge. They're proving to be challenges for you too, Sam. I agree. These are, if someone asked me to come up with do you have an idea? What would you make?
I have no idea. I'd have to think about it.
I have no idea. The first thing that came to mind was a dart, but I'm not sure why. Maybe it was this bow that has inspired me to come up with a dart. So this is really fun. So it looks like here I think you've hand-drawn the bow here, which is really fun using the pen tool. I love the fact that you've got the very thin line on the side of the bow. What else here?
I would say the thing I don't like about it is this border. And the reason why I don't like it is because the border is so much thicker than the bow itself. What I think I would suggest is see the thickness here. Try to make that border no thicker than there. And that way this border doesn't dominate the actual inner piece, because you'll note this feels light compared to the border. So that would be my main critique with this piece.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I can see that, because it's almost the border, it looks like it's almost sitting on top of the bow because it's top weight heavy.
Yeah, it's in my opinion just a bit too thick.
It's fun. I like it. It's so creative. New to Photoshop Daily Challenge. It looks like this is your avatar post, probably from yesterday.
From yesterday.
So that's great.
It looks great.
Looks awesome. Good job. This one as well. It's so fun. The colors and shadows are really exciting.
So this one,
I love this one.
actually I really like this one because this is personal preference. I love just the abstraction of these simple brush lines and the ability to communicate the idea that it's a piece of watermelon with just using simple splashes and dots and just simple gradients, in my opinion, is awesome. And it's a great way to move in that direction. You don't necessarily have to make things look literal to make them look good. Mm-hmm. And in this case, I think they've done a successful job just using awesome just splotches of color and brush to communicate a watermelon.
Valentina, I think the feedback I would give on this one is I'd love to see you try exploring different hardness and softness to your brush, as well as maybe different sizes here. It looks like, I'm sure, it looks like you have tried a couple different sizes here, but maybe just explore a little bit further on, fatter lines in certain spots and thinner ones in other ones, just to get a little bit more detail. I think it could, maybe next evolution of your drawing.
Great work so far. Keep going.
That's awesome. Okay, using brushes was new to me. This is, Denise, you're new to using brushes and you made this.
Yeah, nice work.
This is excellent.
Great job so far.
Wow, well done. You are awesome at your challenge. This is great. I'd love to see this beside a photo of you because it looks like you would make a very lovely avatar. So awesome job. Great. Keep going on using brush tools. And I'd love to see the tool that you create as well. Oh, they're back again. This is fun. So
I think I'd have some of the same critique from before. Again, the border a little bit too thick, so you'll note the stroke weight here and the stroke weight here aren't the same. Not that they have to be, but I would rather see the border not as thick. I'd like to see a little bit of white space around each of these icons as well. So by making this stroke a little thinner, you'll create more white space around the piece because this feels a little bit tight to me. But I think the rendering job you've done is solid. And I think it's an excellent start, but I've said it before, I like kind of consistent stroke weights, and I personally do not like when borders are thicker than the subject matter itself.
That's good.
But it's just my opinion.
I'd like to see the chicken leg have a little bit more brightness to it as well. Maybe just popping a highlight on the top. I think it would make it look a little bit less heavy as well, because the other two, the one in the center and the one on the far right, do appear to be visually lighter as well. So just balancing out the light.
I'm not sure in this case what the X4 means, but I think this is an excellent start. I really like the use of the drop shadow here to give it some depth, so it looks like you've kind of have a light source coming down here to create a nice drop shadow to give it some depth. Mm-hmm. And then you've used just some nice simple brushes to come in and create some details to help give us, as the people looking at it, an idea exactly what it is you're trying to communicate here. And I think you've done a successful job at it. As for critique, I don't know. I guess I would have to know kind of what you were going for, but in my opinion, I think that's a successful start.
It's fun. It is fun. I like how you did, it's like a 3D cut as well. A lot of them are very head-on. This one, you've challenged yourself to explore a cut angle on the piece as well, which I think was a great challenge for you to try versus a flat piece of meat.
Yeah, excellent start.
Tibbs, we have a backpack here.
Tibbs. I gotta say, I really like this one. And why? Because they've added some patches and some great drop shadows. And this person, to me, seems like they have a really good control over the brush. They understand how the brush can be blended. They understand how the shadows work. And then just the fun little visual interest of adding patches and stuff like that adds, it communicates wear and tear and then the age of the bag and kind of the fact that it's kind of slumping a little bit, to my eyes at least. Gives it some weight, so I don't have a critique on this one. I really like it.
Yeah, I have difficulty having a critique on this one too. I just kind of want to pick up that backpack and open it up and see what's inside. So
yeah.
Maybe all these other things in the feet are inside. Maybe there's watermelon inside too.
Yeah, great job so far. Oh, we got another watermelon. Yeah. I think the same critique from before. I like how you have little glossy bits to show kind of the wetness of
cute.
the watermelon. I think my main critique here, though, is since you've kind of gone down the theme of having reflective properties, perhaps a little more texture in the actual watermelon itself, kind of showing it that it has like a glossy texture. So perhaps a brush that has little white specks in it, just overlaid ever so slightly, just to kind of give it a little bit of extra texture. So let's say this red here is a layer. You could do a layer mask or whatever over top of it, and just add a little bit of white textures, kind of similar to how perhaps a real watermelon might look when the light's kind of hitting it from this angle. But again, I'm nitpicking, and I think it's a very good start.
Well, we're working hard to come up with critiques here. I'd like to see this one, I'd like to see the watermelon have a little bit of weight on the ground as well. So it looks like it is, in this example, it looks like it is floating, which is awesome, because if it was a floating watermelon, it would also be very cool. But I'd like to see you maybe try exploring some of the shadow source. So it looks like we've got a light source on the top of the watermelon. So maybe just seeing what we could do with shadows on the base as well.
Yep. Or alternatively, remove any sort of thing referring to light source and depth.
That's fun though. That's really
and that
fun.
looks like it.
That was so fun, guys. I love
great
these
work.
daily
Great
creative
work.
challenges.
I mean, keep it coming. Keep trying. And personally, I don't think you can do anything wrong as long as you keep trying. And I think failing is a huge part of the process. So that's why I feel critique and stuff is very important.
Yeah.
Don't let it discourage you, and keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until the day you die.
I'd like to see, maybe just drop in the chat here. I'd like to know how much time each of you spent on your daily creative challenges.
Yeah,
I think it'd be curious to know. So, yeah, let us know how much time you've spent, and maybe how many of these you've done now. It'd be great to know. So we've got about, let's see, 15 or so minutes left of our feed. So I think the next step we're gonna go into is, so we've done a minor exploration here of showing you the different concept stages and how we get to present what we would consider final art. And that's when we would go back to the client and work on a narrative and actually pitch the art back to the client. So in this example, we typically would start with a sketchbook, come up with the rough drafts of the Monarch Wings, and then move to digital form where we're doing the very rough version of the Monarch Wings final, and then moving on to this final iteration here that you see now. So with this RFP process that we were walking through, Steve had shown you it was a two-phase process. So the city of Guelph had put out the call for murals. For those of you just joining us, we had found the call for murals. We had decided we wanted to apply for it. We then got shortlisted of over 200 submissions for this particular call for artists. So in coming up with phase 2 of our art, we actually had to come up with concept. This is one of our biggest challenges, coming up with concept for final art, because there's so many things you can do. Like, much like the Daily Creative Challenge we just watched, like, you guys came up with some phenomenal ideas. So it can be really tough sometimes to come up with, for example, 5 to 7 different pieces of concept design, and then have to continuously move through the pieces of art and finalize one that you are confident to send to the client. So in this case, we wanted to come up with something that would be very engaging for the community, has great social dynamics, has alignment to history and background of where we were painting, which in this case is beside the farmers market in the city of Guelph. And we put it into a proposal here that you see by following the RFP process, which clearly lines out all of the different steps on what needs to be involved in the final document. Again, we do not only create the final art in Photoshop, but we also create these documents as well by using all of Adobe's Creative Suite to piece things together.
So what you're seeing here is a conceptual drawing. So the final drawing that Sandy is going to be working on tomorrow if you join us. She's going to attempt to polish this, and she'll do one wing, that way she can mirror it. But she'll show you how she uses grid systems and stuff like that, and how she creates rhythm and things like that, how she selects colors, things like that, how she draws on in Photoshop, for example. We use a lot of color layers to draw on, and I think not a lot of people would do that. And the reason we like to do that, let me pull up a different layer here. So you'll note that the background here is black, but let's say I wanted to quickly change it to, I don't know, green. I can do that very quickly. And all I have to do is illustrate in the actual mask. It's a little bit counterintuitive because let's say, for example, you are drawing black and you start drawing. You're actually drawing in white. You'll notice over here. That's a white brush. It's just the nature of a mask, right? It's black or white or gradients in between that help determine opacity and things like that. But it's an excellent way to quickly conceptualize because it allows us to really change the color quickly if we really want to. And you can still apply all things like I don't know, gradient effects and things like that if you absolutely want to, or you do anything you want. But in our case, it's for the sake of speedy conceptualization.
We are going to use the last 5 minutes or so of our feed to answer any questions that you do. So put your questions into the chat window now. We'll make sure that we get back to them by the end of the chat. I was just going to build on what you were just saying with building, with working in layer masks. So this is a transition that I've gone through as an artist. I've always been very comfortable working, with pencil and paper. But when I had to move to working in a digital surface, working in Photoshop, that transition is it's really tough in the beginning because you're so used to just having a writing tool and then having a piece of paper and being able to have your lines go exactly where you want them on the piece of paper. So the process does take time. It takes lots of getting used to. Here's a quick video of me. Once I get into the flow, I'm able to quickly move the canvas, get some of the details in place, rotate the canvas. And this is a piece of art you see now in action happening in this video, which it's fun to see now.
You can see the fast conceptualization, not a whole lot of thought put into the actual detail work.
Yeah.
But again, it's for conceptualizing the mural. That way you can land the mural, and then once you've landed, then you start really thinking about the detail work, and and in my case, the grid system underlying it, and kind of where everything lays, and what kind of rhythm I can create, and what colors to select, and the materials. And there's a whole lot of things that you want to think about. But the first step is to actually create a concept, and that's what this document here is. It's our concept with basic grid system. So again, you can see just a basic radial grid, very simple, just to help us determine where to place basic lines. And what that does is like when you're drawing or even writing in a notebook, a lined notebook, the lines are there for a reason, is so you write as neatly as you possibly can. So there's no difference when you're drawing. It's like, why not create a grid system underneath to help guide where your lines live? So when you remove the grid system, there's an underlying order there that most people can't see consciously, but you can feel, and that's sort of what we're trying to go for here. It's not sort of what we're trying to go for. It is what we're trying to go for.
Yeah. Yeah, so I found that transition of moving just from a clean layer and using the paintbrush tool, when I learned the next step of moving with the painter, with the masking tool, to be able to switch the color quickly. It's a transition to work in that, it's a different way of working, but I'm getting more comfortable with it now, and the more I do it, the more I see the benefits of being able to add different masking tools and different layer effects, and it's quite exciting. The challenge of learning is very hard, but it feels so good when you do it. Yeah. It's so good when you learn it. So I know, like, Steve's been using the Creative Suite for 20 years, you were saying?
Well, no. I've been using it since the Creative Suite came out, but I have been using Adobe products since about 1998.
A long time. And I'm sure you're constantly learning as well through
Absolutely.
programs like Adobe Live. And
Photoshop is so complex. Like, for example, because I'm not in VFX, I rarely ever use, say, 3D effects or things like the calculations tool. Like, I can't even remember where it is. It's buried in here somewhere. But
there's
all kinds of really crazy things and just so much power under the hood here that you can use. And there's so many tips, tricks, and techniques that I'm unaware of.
Yeah.
That as I go through the process and as I learn and as I fail, I will hopefully improve more and more and more, and then hopefully the work gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and then the process never ends. I think that's something that you do throughout your whole life. Just keep trying, and never stop.
Yeah. Yeah, so I always think about the moment when you come up with the final art. In this case, we come up with final concept and we're getting ready to, so we've got this Google Doc open and we're drafting out all of our narrative and our story and making sure that we have all the pieces in place that are required to go through with the submission. And I just remember this particular night when we were sending this through, we got the email drafted, Steve took the concept art, put it into his formal documentation, and then we're getting ready to draft the email, put the attachments in, and I just felt this feeling of anxiety when you're about to hit the send, and you don't know what the client is going to think on the other end. In this case, we're up against, we had shortlisted from over 200 submissions for this call for artists for this particular project. We got shortlisted as top 3 for this site, so we already made it so far that the simple act of hitting send can make or break all the work that's gone into the particular call for artists in this Main Street project that we were submitting for. So I always find that probably the most anxious part of this process is hitting send on your final comp art and seeing what happens. So we do have a great question here from Marissa. When you create pieces like this, do you use a painterly approach? So starting with the biggest color over a large area and then building up layers on top of that? It's a very good question. We are starting to explore now using a lot more rendering techniques and color in the background of our line work. So especially if you go through a lot of our earlier projects, it's primarily black and white and 2 or 3 color. But you could see in some of the later projects we're doing, we're actually putting a lot more, this is a great one, we do a lot more airbrushing technique underneath the line work. We're also experimenting more with, blending color underneath. All of that has to happen before those final black lines are put on at the very end. So it's very much a painterly approach. It really comes down to thinking about, you've got this basic structure outline in the pencil, and then you're going to fill in the big blocks, and then you're going to add, a little bit more refinement on top, and then you've got your highlight layer, your shadow layer, and then you've got your final line work on top. So it's a process to get to that point, but it's so fun. And this takes us probably to where we're at now, which tomorrow we're going to be taking where we're at today. We're actually going to be starting final artwork. So if we do summarize what we did today, this was a full day. We've now been on air for almost 2 hours, which is awesome. Thank you to those of you who are still in the feed and those of you who have just joined. We're so excited to see all of you here and sharing this journey with us. So today we went through conceptualizing the artwork design phase. We talked about how we send updates to the client and work with the feedback. We talked about the different stages that the client goes through in terms of going back and forth on concept art and on color and feedback. It's a tedious process, but the Creative Suite makes it very fast, to be frank.
Well, that's just it. I mean, I think we showed you before, is some of our first works, we did not use the Creative Suite. We just drew on a piece of paper, and that totally works. It totally works. But the Creative Cloud, especially Photoshop and Illustrator in this case, allows us to conceptualize very, very rapidly. So we can lose the ideas we dislike very, very rapidly as well, and really focus on those ideas that we feel is strong, and then might give us, in this case, because we wanted to win this RFP, we picked the one that we liked best. And so we pitch, again, this is a low fidelity illustration. I wished I had
which one are you thinking of?
The Galt Wings one to share you, but
it's on Instagram. There's lots of feedback on Instagram. Well, sure, we do have about a minute and a half left, but we can pull that one up quick.
I'll pull that one up super quick just to give you an idea. So we created another pair of wings here called Galt Wings. So it's another interactive wings, and you kind of see the floral background on a teal. Just simple, so people can engage with it. But the initial piece of artwork was very rough, very similar to this, but then we come back in and we hyper polish it.
Yeah.
Here's Sandy. You can see the thinness of the lines that really need to be thickened and stuff like this. This was on stucco.
Oh boy.
Maybe painting with a brush wasn't a great idea, but we absolutely love crisp lines, so it's a must. You must paint it with a brush because I don't feel like spray paint leaves a bit of a feathered edge a little bit, but we wanted something super crisp, so we opted to paint it on the stucco by hand.
There's a video somewhere, I'm not sure if I'll have time to get to it, but it shows the poking process of having to gather all of the stucco. It's pretty...
Let's see if I can quickly find it.
I think it's at the top. That was awesome. Thank you so much for your feedback. So you guys do have a great lineup coming up. For those of you who do continue and stay here on Adobe Live today, we have the Peter Del Tonto coming up with an XD Daily Creative Challenge. So that'll be really interesting. Awesome. He's coming up in 5 minutes. Couple minutes, so stay tuned. That's a good one.
Stay tuned. It's going to be very good.
We've also got a case study with Joanna Iwata coming up. Sorry, Joshua.
Apologies, Joshua.
Sorry, Joshua. Coming up at 12 o'clock. So it's going to be really exciting to see some of those pieces come together. And then we'll be back tomorrow. So we're back here in the Adobe studios at 9:30 Pacific and 12:30 Eastern. We're going to walk through how to take this final concept art and bring it through to the final stages.
And thanks for everybody for joining. And some of you know it's our 8-year wedding anniversary today, and we're in beautiful San Francisco. What a great place to celebrate it. So I think it's off to get some ice cream after this. What do you think?
I like that deal.
Yeah, sounds like a great idea.
Good times. Thanks everyone for joining.